My talk is forbidden words. I want to assure everyone here that I don't believe I'll use any words that will offend you. However, if I see anyone leaving the room in the middle of this talk, I will merely assume he or she is going to the restroom. Shakespeare wrote, "'Tis needful that the most immodest word be looked upon and learned." This paper makes 3 points about these immodest words. First, words are powerful. There is an expression, "Sticks and stones can break my bones, but words can never hurt me." This simply isn't true. Second, words and their meaning continually change. English is a living language. Third, taboo language can do many different things. Cursing can be offensive, or it can be funny. It can incite animosity, or it can cement friendships. It all depends on context. Understanding this, Shakespeare met the demand for bawdy humor by obliquely referring to taboo words. Though he never used the F word explicitly, his plays contain examples of puns and references to the F word. Taboo words remain ubiquitous today. Last year, the New York Times asked its subscribers, how often, if at all, do you swear or curse in conversation? Only 11% said never, while 61% said occasionally, and 26% said frequently. 2% said always. Timothy Jay, a professor at the Massachusetts College of Liberal Arts, summarized studies about the frequency of taboo words. He found those studies show that swear words are 0.3 to 0.5% of speech people use every day. That's 1 in every 200 or 300 words. His list of swear words include the phrase, "oh my God," abbreviated as OMG and ubiquitous in social media. Jay contends that 2/3 of swearing is to express anger or frustration. Why do we swear when we are angry? Obscenities and vulgarities seem to perform a psychological function. A study from Keele University in the UK demonstrated that swearing may not just express pain, but help relieve pain. The study used college students and a bucket of ice water. Students had to hold a hand in the bucket of ice water as long as they could. The students who could swear reported less pain and could keep the hand out of the water on average 40 seconds longer than the students who weren't allowed to swear. Why is this? Part of the reason may be that expletives are stored in a different part of the brain than the rest of language. Expletives appear to be stored in the right hemisphere, while the rest of language is stored in the left hemisphere. This theory suggests that profanity activates the amygdala, and the amygdala triggers the fight or flight response, which dulls pain. Vulgar language can provide covert prestige to otherwise conventional speakers. The authors of four-letter word games, The Psychology of Obscenity, say that, quote, "the quasi-decorous use of profanity in a fashionable context becomes a handy instrument for having one's world both ways. With a judiciously dropped four-letter bon mot, we can, in sophisticated circles, be at the same time rebellious and respectable, prim and prurient." For example, during the 2004 election campaign, both candidates, John Kerry and Dick Cheney, used forms of the F word. While they received mild criticism for their language, each man positioned himself as a speaker who puts directness over convention. Presidential candidate Donald Trump has increased the vulgarity in his rhetorical strategy. In addition to telling people to F themselves, he said he would beat the S out of anyone attacking his supporters. Columnist Michael Gearson contends that Trump identifies crudity with populism, as if using words of 4 letters were a protest against prim elites. Rough language is intended to convey strength and authenticity. It is not always easy to define precisely what profanity is. As a radio broadcaster, I follow the Federal Communication Commission's, FCC, regulations concerning obscene and indecent speech. All broadcasters know about George Carlin's 1972 monologue, 7 words you can never say on television. If you want to know these words, a quick internet search will satisfy your curiosity. The FCC reprimanded Pacifica Foundation after its New York City FM station broadcast the monologue. The Supreme Court upheld the ruling. Some of the 7 words are slightly less offensive today, and one of the 7 has been in commonplace use for decades, usually in the phrase, pissed off. To keep out of trouble with the FCC over the obscenity regulations, most radio stations install recording devices to delay for 5 to 10 seconds all speech from non-employees. The court battles over profanity on radio and television are fascinating, especially when the court tries to distinguish between what is indecent and what is art. It seems capricious if expletives on Saving Private Ryan and nudity in Schindler's List are okay, but neither is acceptable on television's NYPD Blues. Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg opined, "One cannot tell what's indecent and what isn't." Responding to cultural norms, today's television dramas are more linguistically frank. Because cable television is exempt from the FCC's obscenity rules, the language in its programming is more explicit than that in over-the-air broadcasting. The New York Times reported, broadcast television is under siege by smaller cable competitors that are winning audiences while pushing adult content. There's nothing new with obscenity concerns in popular entertainment. George Bernard Shaw's Pygmalion sparked controversy in 1914 when the actress playing Eliza Doolittle used the phrase, "not bloody likely." And years later, in 1962, the language in the play Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf was so disturbing that the trustees of Columbia University rejected the vote of its Pulitzer Prize Committee. In 1994, some critics objected to giving the Man Booker Prize to James Kilman's novel, How Late It Was, How Late, because it used the F word over 4,000 times. In the 1942 musical, 42nd Street, Ginger Rogers sings, "He did right by little Nellie with a shotgun in his belt," and then substitutes tummy for belly. Belly was considered rude, while tummy was acceptable because of its association with children. In the 1939 film, Gone with the Wind, Clark Gable says, "Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn." Prior to its release, censors objected to the use of the word damn, a word that had been prohibited by the 1930 Motion Picture Association's production code. A month before the film's release, however, the code was amended to allow using the word damn if it was a quotation from a literary work. Just as different times have different forbidden words, different cultures also have them. Little People of America, an advocacy group for people 4 feet 10 inches tall and under, successfully petitioned the government to cease labeling small raisins as midgets. The term midget is offensive to little people who view it as a slur. They call it the M word. The Little People's drive to banish their distasteful word is less controversial than the Native Americans' attempt to force the Washington Redskins to drop the word Redskins. While the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office has won court approval of its decision that the team's name may disparage Native Americans, the team's fans disagree. One prominent fan, George Will, said, "We have a new national passion for moral and historical hygiene, a determination to scrub away remembrances of unpleasant things." To avoid disturbing others, we are polite. So we use polite terms for impolite thoughts. We use euphemisms, which are typically more colloquial and figurative than the more formal term. The more formal term is called an orthophonism, which is more direct, literal, or clinical than the corresponding euphemism. In the 1500s, as English began taking its place alongside Latin as a world language, a fashion arose for using fancy Latinate terms in place of native English ones for more private matters. The vulgar term for the same concept is a dysephonism, which is an obscenity. Here is an example. Feces is the orthophonism, poo is the euphemism, while the dysephonism is the S word. So I ask, who has ever stubbed his toe in the dark and cried out, "Oh, feces"? If you are fascinated by sex, enjoy insulting people, and dislike euphemisms, I suggest you obtain the disgusting little book called Depraved and Insulting English. In it, Peter Novotsky and Eamon Shea list alphabetically all of the depraved words, over 1,000, they could find in the English language. The taboo topic of death has generated a lot of euphemistic expressions, such as pass away, go to a better place, meet our maker, depart, and no longer with us. And then there are a lot of irreverent ones, like push up the daisies, kick the bucket, cash out, and get a one-way ticket. Taboo words have always existed. However, many of the banned words of our ancestors seem mild today, while we've come up with a new list of obscenities. In medieval English, when wars were fought over religious doctrine, the chief category of profanity was swearing in the name of God. To swear to or by God was sinful. The Old Testament says, "And he that blasphemeth the name of the Lord, he shall surely be put to death, and all the congregation shall certainly stone him." The need to avoid such transgressions produced various euphemisms, many of them still in use today, such as by Jove, by George, gosh, and golly. Zounds was a twice shortening of by his wounds, as in those of Jesus. In the 19th century, darn came into the language when people avoided saying eternal damnation by saying tarnation, which was recast as darnation, from which we got darn. By the late 18th century, sex, excretion, and the body parts associated with them transitioned from being merely bawdy to being as equally profane as religious swearing. Delicacy about body parts made some everyday words vulgar. For example, leg was seen as an impolite, if not bad word, and was replaced with limb in polite society. In talking about cooked chicken, white and dark meat originated as terms to avoid mentioning breast and leg. The word occupy was taboo in the 17th and 18th centuries because it referred to having sexual relations. Sexual obscenities have been taboo for a long time, including, of course, the F word, which dates back to the 16th century. Though the original edition of the gigantic Oxford English Dictionary, published in 1884, did not include the F word, all modern dictionaries, including the now online Oxford English Dictionary, define it. If you want to know more about the F word, there are 270 pages about it in Jesse Schnedlauer's book entitled the F word. While the book includes many things you won't want to know, you will learn that some euphemisms for the word are frickin', freaking, and friggin', as well as the social media exclamation, WTF. Euphemisms, however, are no longer employed in hit cable television shows like The Sopranos and Girls. Many viewers consider the classic four-letter words as no longer truly profane. They qualify more as salty or bad words, only to be avoided in work or school. A 20-something woman I know illustrated this idea when she told me she did not consider the F word or the S word taboo. While she would not use these words around her elders, she is comfortable using them with her peers, calling them oral exclamation points. Some bad words are identical to perfectly fine words or can carry both taboo and non-taboo meanings. And the taboo meaning can, in the long run, drive out the non-taboo meaning. An example of this is the word cock, a perfectly acceptable term for a rooster in our once more agrarian society. Within the deaf culture, there is a distinction between the signs used to curse versus signs that are used to describe sexual acts. In usage, signs to describe sexual behavior are taboo because of their graphic nature. Some signs do overlap, but they also may vary according to usage. For example, the sign for the S word when used to curse is different from the sign for the S word when used to describe the bodily function or fecal matter. Profanity also exists in emojis. Emojis are those ideograms that originated in Japanese electronic messages and are now spread across the web. It is disquieting to visit the BuzzFeed webpage entitled 21 Glorious Ways to Swear Using Emojis. Disquieting because these childish and innocent-looking cartoons depict our worst vulgarities. While many of our ancestors' forbidden words seem quaint today, we're actually quite like our ancestors when it comes to taboo words. We observe profane words today, just different ones. Today, what we regard as truly objectionable isn't just sex and religion, but the slandering of groups that have historically suffered discrimination. Offensive words now are those deemed racist, sexist, and homophobic. Two other F words, faggot and fairy, are no longer appropriate. Also, as mentioned earlier, Redskins is under attack. And today's most profane words include the C word, once suitable for an anatomy book discussion of women's bodies, and of course, the N word. Last summer, President Obama sat down with comedian Mark Moran for an hour-long podcast interview on many diverse topics. In the 47th minute, when talking about race relations, Obama mentioned the N-word. CNN reported on the interview with the headline, "Obama uses N-word." Obama sent Fox and Friends host Elizabeth Hasselbeck into a fit. She said, "I think many people are wondering if it's only there that he would say it." Note that Obama was not using the word as an expletive, but in an academic semantic discussion. Nonetheless, the N-word is now more objectionable than the F word and more complicated. In 2014, the National Football League instructed game officials to penalize players who use the N-word on the playing field. The NFL's zero-tolerance policy gave officials the authority to issue a 15-yard penalty for the first offense and ejection from the game for a second. But this well-intentioned policy was widely criticized as being heavy-handed and out of touch. A Washington Post feature on the N-word said the NFL policy is almost certainly doomed to fail, to be ignored at best or mocked and flouted at worst. Why did the Post think it was doomed to fail? Besides being offensive, hateful, or a source of humor, profanity can be a source of camaraderie and established solidarity. For decades, there have actually been two N-words, one ending in an A and the other in ER. The ER version is linked with hateful, racist origins. The one ending in A is said to be a term of endearment when used among African Americans. There are those who argue, however, that these two versions are not so much distinct words as they are just different pronunciations of the same evil word. Semantic studies do show that what's taboo for one speaker or community might not be prohibited by another speaker or community. Here's what law professor and author Paul Butler said. I'm an African American, and I have a right to use that word in a way that white people don't. I'm not talking about a legal right, I'm talking about a moral right. I don't think that's so hard to understand. Dissali Trudie, a hip-hop dancer, had another viewpoint when she said, as African Americans, we have kind of taken this word and flipped some vowels, and somehow it's okay, but then it's not. This word has so much power. Everyone's just saying it's cool. It's just how I say my brother. It's just an expression. But no, it's not. Will the N-word ever gain respectability, as have other former taboo words? There are some indicators. In Atlanta, Christian rapper Sho Baraka reached the top of the U.S. gospel music charts with the album Talented Tenth that makes brief use of the N-word, an inclusion that shook up the Christian pop music world. You can hear the N-word in the halls of most American high schools, and not just spoken by African Americans. Hip-hop music is desensitizing our youth to the word. John McWhorter, a Columbia University linguist professor, thinks the N-word will eventually become omnipresent. He said, frankly, we're just going to have to get used to it. It's a generational shift, and it's permanent. Others would disagree. Certainly, while it may have made inroads into the youth culture, the N-word is not joined mainstream American culture. The introduction of taboo words into mainstream vocabulary might come in the future from services like Siri, the voice-activated assistant that debuted on the iPhone in 2011. Unbeknownst to Apple executives, their engineers programmed the phone with hidden, risque jokes. Red-faced executives removed them as they were discovered. Perhaps future technology executives will want to stretch language boundaries in an attempt to make Siri and her cousins like Alexa seem more hip and even a little more human. History has taught us that you can't stamp out taboo words. The authors of Forbidden Words believe that bad language is not some nasty habit that we can be broken of, like smoking in restaurants or nail biting. Forbidden words flourish all the more vigorously on a diet of individual censoring and public disapproval. In this paper, I made 3 observations. First, words are powerful. In fact, they are so powerful, we won't even say some of them. Second, words change all the time. The human mind is creative, and with that creativity, we change the language. And third, what is taboo varies with context. Cursing can be offensive, or it can be funny. It can excite animosity, or it can cement friendships. And there can be a psychological benefit by using forbidden words. Taboo language does a lot of different social work. There is an exuberance of expression that proliferates around the language taboo. The authors of Forbidden Words end their book with this about obscenities. These expressions range from the exquisitely lyric to the downright crass. Yet many demonstrate an expressiveness and poetic ingenuity worthy of William Shakespeare. Thank you.